A man is standing in a boatyard in Stuart, Florida, staring at an old trawler with a hand-lettered sign zip-tied to the rail. $89,900. The broker in the clean polo shirt calls it an entry-level liveaboard, a starter boat, a way into the life for under 6 figures. 2 years later, that same man has written a second check for $41,000, and he still can't find a marina that will let him sleep on the thing. He did everything the listing told him to do. He still got buried. And he is not the only one. Across the country right now, retirees are being sold 6-figure boats with the word entry stamped on them like it means cheap. So how do so many of them end up paying for the same boat twice before they ever leave the dock? 18 months before he signed, that buyer was doing exactly what you're probably doing right now, scrolling listings after dinner, telling himself $100,000 was plenty, circling the boats that look clean in the golden hour photos. The dream was a good one and a simple one. Buy the boat once, learn it, fix what breaks, and live on the water for about what an apartment costs. Nobody told him the apartment doesn't try to sink, and this is the part that ought to make you angry. Because the people getting hit hardest are retirees on a fixed income, spending the money they saved over 40 years of work on a dream a salesman already knew was a trap. So let's start with the number, because the number is where the trick lives. When somebody on YouTube tells you that you can get into the liveaboard life for under $100,000, they are technically telling the truth. A project-grade Taiwan trawler, a Marine Trader 34, a CHB 34, something built in the 1970s or early 80s really can be found asking $15,000 to $30,000. But that is a project boat. And a project boat is not a place to live. That is a place to spend your weekends and your savings, in roughly that order. The boat that will actually pass a survey, the one that floats and runs and won't fail you the first hard winter, that boat is closer to $40,000 or $55,000. And the boat the broker actually walks you toward, the DeFever 44, the Bayliner 4588, the KD Crowgun 42 he keeps calling an entry boat, that one starts north of $115,000 and climbs from there. So you've got 3 completely different boats wearing the same word. That's not an accident. The word entry is doing a job, and the job is to make a 6-figure boat feel like a starter and a project boat feel like a steal when neither one is what it looks like. But the version you've heard, the under 6 figures version, that is not the full picture. And the rest of the picture is the part that costs you. Here's what the listing leaves out, and it's the whole game. The price you pay for the boat and the price you pay to make the boat livable are 2 different numbers, and the second one is the bigger one. The same low sticker that made it look like a steal is the exact thing that guarantees the big bill behind it. A cheap old trawler is cheap because somebody stopped spending money on it, and everything they stopped spending is now waiting for you. Take the teak decks everybody falls in love with in the photos. When the fasteners corrode and water gets under that teak, it rots the core underneath, and a full teak deck replacement runs $30,000 to $60,000. That's not a typo, by the way. You can buy the whole boat for less than it costs to fix the deck on the boat. Then there's the fuel tanks. Those 1970s and 80s Taiwan trawlers were built with mild steel tanks, black iron, and black iron rots from the inside in salt water. Replacing them runs $8,000 to $15,000. And on a lot of these boats, you have to cut out cabinetry or the hull itself just to reach them. Add the hoses, the cooling system, the wiring nobody's touched since Reagan, and watch what happens. Steve Zimmerman, a trawler man I'll come back to in a minute, figured the hoses alone on a 40-foot trawler can run close to $20,000 to replace. And they're the thing nobody budgets for until one lets go in the engine room. A buddy of mine watched a CHB 34, fully done, teak pulled and glassed over, repowered, new windows, come up for sale at almost $99,000. The same hull that sells as a $30,000 project finished right costs almost $100,000. So that entry boat at $115,000 and the cheap boat at $30,000, once both of them are actually ready to live on, they meet in the middle. That was only round 1. So you've made peace with the refit. Good. But what the marina does next makes the refit look gentle. Here's the part almost nobody thinks about till the money is already gone. And it is the part that explains why that man in Stewart still can't sleep on his boat. A slip you can visit and a slip you're allowed to live in are two completely different products. The second one is scarcer, it's pricier, and in a lot of places, it flat out doesn't exist. Most marinas that even allow liveaboards charge a surcharge on top of regular dockage, somewhere between $200 and $800 a month, just for the right to call it home. Key West charges a monthly per-person liveaboard fee on top of the per-foot rate. A marina up in Anacortes, Washington, tax 15% onto the moorage. Vero Beach adds $100 a month per boat and caps the whole marina at 20 liveaboards total. In somewhere like Vancouver, the liveaboard waitlist runs longer than 10 years, which is to say, it isn't a waitlist, it's a polite no. And plenty of marinas don't allow liveaboards at all by local rule, or by their own lease. So the closer you get to the water people actually want to live near, the fewer doors are open to you. Pay attention to this next part, because it explains the whole thing. You can buy the boat and still have nowhere legal to live on it. A real liveaboard slip for a 40 to 45 footer in South Florida or Southern California can run $12,000 to $25,000 a year, and that's before the power meter even starts spinning. So the man who bought a boat to escape rent just signed up for rent, a surcharge, and a wait list. So yeah, not great. And here's the cruel timing of it. You buy the boat first because the boat is the exciting part, and only then do you go looking for somewhere to keep it. By the time you learn the good marinas are capped, banned, or backed up for years, the money is already spent, and the boat is already yours, and the slip is just one line on the bill. Let's build the yearly number the way an honest owner does, because no single cost is the killer. It's the whole stack of them together. Start with dockage at around $11 a foot a month. Add a haul out twice a year at $10 to $15 a foot just to lift the boat out of the water. Then pressure washing, bottom paint, and fresh zincs on top of that. Add insurance, add the pump out for the holding tank, and add the shore power that's almost always metered on its own. One owner ran the real prorated math on a $40,000 Mainship 34, 6 years of receipts, and it came out to about $12,000 a year to use a boat he already owned free and clear. The boat was paid off, and it still ran $12 grand a year just to exist. That's the math the photos never show you, and none of that $12,000 counts the things that feel small until they pile up. The electric you pay by the kilowatt at the pedestal, the holding tank you pump out every week or two, the dinghy and outboard you need just to reach shore at half the cheaper anchorages. Stack the liveaboard slip we already talked about on top of all that, and the boat you bought to live cheap can end up costing more than the apartment you walked away from. And there's a rule of thumb the honest owners live by that nobody believes until it happens to them. 10% of the purchase price every single year just for upkeep. On a $150,000 trawler, that's $15,000 a year, before slip fees, before fuel, before insurance. And insurance on these older boats is its own quiet trap, because the company won't write the policy without a recent survey, and a bad survey gets you denied flat out. A $50,000 boat might insure for $500 to $1,700 a year. A $200,000 boat, $2,000 to $7,000 more in a hurricane zone. And the haul-outs come whether you're ready or not. Most of these boats want their bottom painted every year or two. And once the yard has the boat up in the slings, the little jobs you kept putting off all surface at once. The through hulls, the cutlass bearing, the shaft seal. A routine haul-out has a way of turning into a 4-figure afternoon. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry. If you're shopping for a liveaboard right now, or you're 3 years out and still just dreaming on it, this is the channel that turns wrenches instead of polos. Hit subscribe, because I do this every week, one boat and one ripoff at a time. So you've swallowed the refit, the slip, and the yearly bill, but every number so far assumed the engine was sound. And that's the assumption that empties retirement accounts. And the experts in my comments will back me up on this one. The single biggest mistake a first-time Liveaboard buyer makes is trusting low hours on the meter. A diesel that sat at a dock barely running can be in worse shape than one that worked for a living. The man who literally wrote the book on this, Steve Zimmerman over at PassageMaker, lays it out with load factor, how hard the engine works against what it could do. Builders want to see that engine living under 35% load with the happy zone down around 10 to 30. This is why the old Ford Lehman 120 is the engine the surveyors quietly recommend to their own families. It's a marinized Ford industrial diesel, dead simple, and the same oil filter that costs $28 at the marine counter costs $9 at the truck counter. Run easy. The men who rebuild these say a Lehman 120 is good for 12 to 14,000 hours between major overhauls. Now put a Detroit 8 V92 in that same slow trawler, and you got the opposite story. That's a high RPM engine being asked to loaf, and it hates it, glazing its bores, wet stacking, smoking black at the speed a Liveaboard actually runs. And don't let a broker tell you twin engines are automatically safer. A single Lehman sips fuel and costs half as much to keep. And a retired Coast Guard man in my comments will tell you how many one-engine rescues he ran on twin-screw boats that lost a motor anyway. A boat with twin Volvo Penta diesels can cost you $3,000 to $5,000 a year more than the same boat with Lehmans, and that's if you can still get the parts at all. And here's what gets the low-hours buyer every time. Saltwater doesn't care about your hour meter. The cooling system, the heat exchanger, the manifolds, all of it corrodes on a clock that never stops, whether you run the boat or leave it sitting. Tony Athens, a diesel man the experts actually listen to, calls that the engine's marine age. And it's why a barely used dock queen can be sicker than a boat that worked for a living. A single heat exchanger for a Lehman runs about $800. A full cooling system overhaul climbs past $2,000. And a Cummins aftercooler wants service every couple of years, or it'll take the engine with it. The impeller is the cheap part, about $40, and it's the one little thing that'll cook the whole engine if you let it go. That little engine choice feels small when you're signing. It isn't. And no, I'm not making that up. That's the load factor doing exactly what Zimmerman says it does. So who profits from all of this confusion? The man in the polo every time. The word entry does a lot of quiet work for him. It makes a $115,000 boat sound like a starter home, and it makes the $40,000 of work behind it sound like your problem, not his disclosure. He leaves out the refit, the slip you can't get, the insurance you might not qualify for, and the systems running on borrowed time. Turnkey is his other favorite word, and turnkey usually means the last owner quit fixing things and started selling. And remember who signs his check. The broker's commission, around 10%, comes out of the seller's money, which means the friendly man walking you around the deck is paid by the person sitting across the table from you. Old trick from my side of the business. Smell the bilge. Fresh paint and a good story cover a lot. But a boat that's been quietly weeping oil or saltwater for years tells on itself the second you lift that hatch and breathe in. And he's got one line he uses on everybody. Somebody else is coming to look at it tomorrow. Sure, he is. I've heard that one on every dock in America. I dug into cases exactly like this one for the buyer system, and this one still sticks with me. A retired teacher couple from Ohio found a Grand Banks 42 in Stewart listed at $129,000. The broker told them another buyer was coming the next day. A survey they almost skipped found corroded exhaust manifolds, $5,000 an engine, $10,000 total, and the manifolds were back-ordered almost a year. The broker knew. He just needed them to sign before they found out. If they'd hired their own surveyor and walked, this would be a very different story. So, here's the defense, and it's shorter than the problem. Never, ever use the surveyor the broker hands you, because the broker works for the seller, and so might his guy. Hire your own accredited surveyor, SAMS or NAMS. Expect to pay around $18 to $25 a foot, and put a survey contingency in your offer so a bad report lets you walk with your deposit. And don't skip the sea trial or the haul out, no matter how charming the seller gets. Your surveyor stays aboard the whole sea trial, watching the gauges while the boat actually works, because a tired engine or a slipping transmission only shows itself under load. Then you haul the boat out and look at the running gear, the shaft, the rudder, the through holes, the parts that sink you when they fail, and that you cannot see from the dock. On a foam core hull, well, you know, a pre-1993 Katie Krogun 42, for instance, make him run a moisture meter because hidden core rot can cost $50,000 to $70,000 to put right, and ignore the blister panic. A surveyor like David Pascoe will tell you most hull blisters never threaten the boat, no matter what the yard quotes you to grind them off. I put the whole buy-on-sale system in writing, the links below for less than a surveyor charges for 1 hour, and then back to it. One more myth to kill before you go. The cheaper than rent lie. It only works if you ignore the refit, the surcharge, the haul-outs, and the slip you can't actually get. Run the real math, and the dream stops being free. It just stops being a lie. And there's one last number nobody wants to hear. The day you buy is not the expensive day. The day you sell is. Old boaters have a saying that the 2 happiest days are the day you buy the boat and the day you sell it. And there's a reason the selling day made the list. It's easier to buy a boat than to sell one. So, a tired liveaboard can sit for a year while you keep paying slip, insurance, and upkeep on a thing you no longer want. A panic sale and a planned one can be $25,000 apart on the very same boat. And the broker who sold it to you cheap will happily sell it for you cheap too. So, go back to that man in the boatyard staring at the hand-lettered sign. The sticker said $89,900. What he actually bought was a sticker, plus 40 grand of deferred work, plus a slip he had to beg for, plus an engine somebody picked wrong 20 years before he showed up. The boat was never the expensive part. The expensive part was everything the word entry was hiding. A 6-figure entry liveaboard. It's not a bargain you found. It's a bill somebody else deferred and handed to you with a smile. The full playbook's in that link if you want it. Now, the boat I'd actually hand a retiree on a fixed income, the one trawler I'd buy again tomorrow without thinking twice, that's the next video. And it's the one the brokers really don't want you watching.